bar was buzzing quietly that evening, dim lights reflecting off the polished wooden surfaces. Steven Seagal sat at a corner table, a glass of whiskey in hand, enjoying a rare night out with his wife. The air smelled faintly of tobacco and spilled beer, the kind of atmosphere that usually kept trouble at bay. But tonight, the calm would be short-lived. A group of bikers roared in, the unmistakable sound of leather jackets and heavy boots echoing against the walls. At first, they laughed and joked among themselves, scanning the room with cocky grins. One biker, taller and louder than the rest, noticed Seagal's wife across the bar. A smirk crossed his face. He leaned on the counter and muttered something under his breath, loud enough for a few nearby patrons to hear. Seagal didn't flinch. He kept his eyes on his drink, a picture of calm and control, though the atmosphere around him shifted immediately. The biker's comment grew louder, mocking, disrespectful, intended to provoke a reaction. He chuckled to himself, clearly enjoying the attention. Nearby patrons sensed the tension. Conversations died down, phones were raised subtly, and even the bartender paused mid-pour, wary of what might happen next. The biker, thinking this was a chance to show dominance, took a step closer to Seagal's table. "You're her husband?" he sneered, loud and careless. "I bet you don't even notice the way she looks at us." Seagal finally lifted his gaze. It was calm, yet his eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen it all. Countless confrontations, challenges, and disrespect thrown at him over the years. The biker's smirk faltered ever so slightly. The crowd felt it too. The energy shifted. Yet, Seagal said nothing. He didn't shout. He didn't rise from his seat. He simply placed his glass down, slowly, deliberately, letting the tension build like a storm, waiting to break. Every movement was precise, controlled. Around the bar, whispers started. Patrons exchanged glances, some nudging others to watch closely. There was a collective understanding forming. The biker had misjudged the wrong man, and at that moment, the audience knew whatever happened next, it was going to be unforgettable. What Seagal did next left everyone in the bar frozen. The biker wasn't done. In fact, he seemed to grow more confident with each passing second. His mocking laughter bounced off the walls as he made another jab at Seagal's wife, loud enough for several patrons to hear clearly. "Hey, you think your husband even notices what's going on around him?" he sneered. "Looks like he's too busy sipping that tiny glass to protect you." Seagal remained calm, his posture relaxed yet imposing. He didn't react immediately. Every muscle in his body was under control, his gaze steady and unwavering, but the air around him thickened with tension. It was as if the calm itself was a force, pressing against the biker's arrogance. Nearby patrons shifted uncomfortably, sensing the storm about to erupt. Phones were subtly raised, recording, capturing every second of the confrontation. A few muttered under their breath, "Don't mess with him." But the biker ignored the warning signs. He thought he could intimidate Seagal simply by volume and bravado. The biker leaned forward, voice dripping with cocky disdain. "You know, I've seen tougher guys than you crumble under pressure. Maybe tonight's your night, tough guy." He laughed, loud and brash. But it was a nervous laugh, betraying the first hint of uncertainty. Seagal finally spoke, his voice calm, low, but carrying a weight that seemed to silence the bar for a brief moment. "Watch your words," he said slowly, deliberately. "Respect isn't given because you're loud or think you're fearless. Respect is earned, and right now, you're losing it fast." The biker paused, momentarily thrown off by the sheer quiet authority in Seagal's tone. He had expected anger, maybe a fight, but not this. The calmness was unsettling. The crowd began to sense it too. A few whispers spread, "Isn't that Seagal?" and "He's not even moving, yet." The realization sent a ripple of tension through the bar. The biker, stubborn and prideful, pushed on. "You're bluffing. You're not going to do anything," he shouted. But there was an edge in his voice now, a slight uncertainty he couldn't hide. The audience felt it, the first cracks in his cocky facade. Seagal's wife shifted uncomfortably but stayed composed, sensing her husband's strategy. He wasn't going to react with aggression. Instead, he was letting the situation unfold, letting the biker's arrogance expose itself, naturally. It was a lesson in patience, power, and control, all happening in a single, Tense moment. The patrons leaned in, phones still recording. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. And this was the perfect moment for engagement, a chance to pull the audience into the story. Have you ever seen someone completely underestimate a legend? Tell me in the comments and let me know which country or city you're watching from right now. The biker noticed the subtle shift in energy but chose to ignore it. He thought the crowd's silence was fear for him, not for Seagal. He didn't realize that every person watching could sense the calm authority radiating from the seated martial arts legend. Seagal lifted his glass slightly, making a deliberate, almost imperceptible gesture with his hand, a quiet warning that the moment of reckoning was near. The biker laughed nervously, trying to cover up the first flicker of doubt in his eyes, but the tension was palpable, and the rest of the bar could feel it. This confrontation was about to escalate, and nobody was leaving their seats. The bar had gone almost completely silent. Patrons who had been chatting or laughing just moments ago now held their breath, sensing the tension between the cocky biker and Steven Seagal. The biker, emboldened by the initial attention, took another step closer to Seagal's table. His leather jacket creaked as he leaned in, smirking, as if trying to intimidate the martial arts legend with sheer presence. "You think you're untouchable, huh?" The biker sneered, voice louder this time, sitting there like a statue while everyone watches. Pathetic. Seagal didn't flinch. His gaze, calm yet penetrating, locked onto the biker. It wasn't just a look, it was a silent warning, the kind of warning that comes from years of discipline, countless encounters, and an aura of confidence that doesn't need to shout. He remained seated, sipping his drink slowly, letting the tension grow naturally. The biker, misreading the silence, chuckled. "What, you gonna stand up and do what? You're not gonna touch me, are you? I own this bar for tonight." The crowd shifted uneasily. Phones were raised higher, recording every movement. Everyone could feel the danger lurking in the air. The potential for a violent clash was real, but there was something different about Seagal's presence. Even without moving, he exuded control. The energy in the bar was no longer about the biker trying to dominate. It was about Seagal silently teaching him a lesson. Seagal finally spoke, his voice low, measured, and deliberate. "You're making a mistake," he said, not a hint of anger in his tone. "Respect isn't something you take from people by yelling or mocking them. It's something you earn, and right now, you're losing it fast." The biker froze for a fraction of a second, startled. That calm, authoritative voice carried a weight that shook even him. He had expected confrontation, perhaps a punch, a shove, or an angry outburst. But Seagal's quiet composure was far more intimidating. The patrons noticed it too, whispering under their breath, "Isn't that Seagal? And he hasn't even moved, but you can feel it." Instead of backing down, the biker puffed out his chest and tried to laugh off his uncertainty. "You're bluffing. You're all talk," he shouted, attempting to regain his bravado, but the nervous edge in his voice betrayed him, and the smirk faltered slightly. Seagal's wife sat quietly, watching, trusting her husband's control. She knew he wouldn't react impulsively. He was letting the biker's arrogance expose itself for all to see. Each second passed like a slow-motion countdown, and the tension in the room grew unbearable. The biker, still oblivious to how seriously he had miscalculated, stepped even closer, invading Seagal's personal space. Some patrons held their breath, silently warning him to back off, but the biker was cocky, confident that his size and noise would intimidate Seagal. Then came the subtle shift. Seagal placed his hand lightly on the edge of the table, fingers curling almost imperceptibly. The biker noticed the movement small, deliberate, but ignored it, convinced it was insignificant. The crowd leaned forward, sensing the impending moment. Every phone camera was aimed at the scene, everyone knowing they were about to witness something extraordinary. Seagal's eyes didn't move. They locked on the biker's, steady and unwavering. In that gaze, there was no threat, only control, experience, and the unmistakable aura of someone who had been in countless confrontations and always maintained composure. The biker's bravado began to crumble ever so slightly, and the tension in the bar became almost unbearable. The audience watching this unfold, both in the bar and through the cameras, could feel the energy. This wasn't just a personal confrontation. It was a lesson in respect, patience, and power. Everyone knew that whatever happened next would define the biker's evening, and probably his memory of Seagal for the rest of his life. If you were in Seagal's place right now, would you stay calm or respond aggressively. Be honest, comment your choice below. What would you do? The biker's friends started to sense the shift too. The loud confidence they had counted on was fading. Some whispered among themselves, caution in their voices. Maybe we shouldn't have come here, but the main biker refused to admit his growing fear. He leaned closer, trying to assert dominance, not realizing the mistake he was making. Seagal, without raising his voice or standing up, subtly adjusted his posture. His presence seemed to grow, filling the room like a shadow that couldn't be ignored. The biker, now nervous but unwilling to back down publicly, clenched his fists. The room's energy shifted completely. The crowd wasn't just watching, they were waiting, anticipating the exact moment when arrogance would meet experience. Every movement, every breath, every subtle shift in Seagal's calm aura was a masterclass in controlling a confrontation. The biker's cocky laughter had long faded. Now, he was aware maybe for the first time that he had misjudged the wrong man. And the audience felt it too. The reckoning was coming, and nobody in that bar would ever forget what happened next. The biker had clearly underestimated the situation. He thought Seagal's calm demeanor was a sign of weakness, a passive response that he could exploit to assert dominance. With a smirk and a careless laugh, he leaned even closer, invading the space that, in any other circumstance, would have been his to command. The bar seemed to shrink around them. Patrons were suddenly hyper-aware of every movement, every word, every shift in energy. Seagal's gaze never wavered. It was steady, unflinching, and impossible to misread. Though he hadn't risen from his seat, there was an unmistakable weight behind his presence, a combination of years of discipline, martial arts mastery, and a lifetime of understanding human behavior. The biker, however, was blind to this, still mocking and taunting, attempting to provoke a reaction. You think you're untouchable just because you sit there? The biker spat, his voice sharp with arrogance. Look at you sitting pretty, thinking no one can touch you. A few nearby patrons whispered to each other, their voices trembling slightly. He's insane if he thinks he can mock Seagal like that. One muttered. The calm he's showing, that's dangerous. Some started recording every second on their phones, anticipating the moment when the biker would finally pay for his arrogance. The tension in the air was almost physical, a thick, suffocating pressure that pressed on everyone in the bar. Seagal's wife sat quietly, her eyes narrowing slightly, but her expression calm. She could sense the storm brewing, but she trusted her husband implicitly. She knew he would handle it perfectly, not with aggression, not with anger, but with control and precision. Seagal's voice finally broke the silence, low, deliberate, and calm, yet carrying an undeniable authority. You've made a mistake, he said slowly. Respect is not something you demand with words or threats. It is something you earn with your actions. Right now, you're proving the opposite of both. The biker laughed, a little too loudly, trying to hide the first flicker of unease. Actions? What actions? You're not going to do anything, are you? He glanced around, noticing that the entire bar seemed to have shifted its attention toward them. People were leaning forward in their seats, cameras pointed, eyes wide with anticipation. Seagal didn't respond immediately. He simply shifted his body slightly, subtle enough to seem like a minor movement. But the change in posture carried immense weight. The biker noticed a small, almost imperceptible warning but arrogantly dismissed it, confident that he still controlled the situation. The patrons held their collective breath. Some whispered, he's going to teach him a lesson, while others simply shook their heads, unable to believe the sheer audacity of the biker. Everyone in the room could feel it. The calm before the storm, the moment when the arrogant would learn their limits. Seagal's aura was unmistakable now. Even without a single aggressive movement, the biker's smirk faltered. His confidence wavered as a faint shadow of doubt crept into his expression. He realized, just slightly too late, that the man in front of him was not only unafraid but entirely in control. Still, the biker refused to back down. "You're bluffing," he shouted, his voice cracking slightly, betraying the growing fear beneath the bravado. He tried to assert dominance again, waving his arms, attempting to intimidate Seagal with noise and motion, but the calm authority in Seagal's gaze was unshakable. The room's energy had completely shifted. What had started as a typical act of disrespect had become a silent battle of wills. Seagal's quiet confidence dominated the space, while the biker's arrogance began to collapse under the invisible weight of experience, discipline, and control. Would you have recognized the warning signs if you were in the bar? Comment below what you would have done. Step in, leave, or wait to see what happens next. Oh, the biker's friends began to murmur amongst themselves, unsure of how to react. They had counted on his intimidation, his swagger, and his loud confidence to carry the moment. But now the crowd's focus, combined with Seagal's calm, created an environment where their dominance no longer existed. The biker's smirk was gone, replaced by an almost imperceptible hesitation. Seagal's eyes didn't waver. Each blink, each subtle shift of his body, conveyed precision, control, and authority. The biker could feel it, a silent but unyielding force pressing down on him. For the first time, he realized that his arrogance had led him straight into a trap of his own making. The realization came too late to reverse, and the crowd knew it. Even the bar itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. Patrons leaned closer, cameras ready, whispers growing. The energy in the room had transformed completely. This was no longer about a simple act of mockery. This was a lesson in respect, patience, and the undeniable power of calm authority. Every second that passed further exposed the biker's misjudgment. He had mocked, he had challenged, he had underestimated the wrong man. And now, with all eyes on him, the reckoning was imminent. Seagal didn't need to raise his voice or make a threatening move. His calm and focus were already saying everything the biker needed to understand. The storm was building, and the moment of truth was just about to arrive. The bar had gone completely silent now. Even the clinking of glasses and distant laughter from other parts of the establishment seemed to vanish, swallowed by the electric tension between Steven Seagal and the cocky biker. The biker had finally realized, deep down, that he had misjudged the man sitting calmly across from him. He had expected either an angry outburst or a challenge he could dominate with loud words and brute presence, but instead, he faced a man whose stillness and authority were more powerful than any threat he had ever encountered. Seagal's gaze never left the biker. It was a gaze that spoke volumes without a single word. Every person in the bar could feel it, experience, control, and a lifetime of discipline radiating in a quiet, yet terrifying way. The biker swallowed hard, his smirk fading as doubt began to replace arrogance. He had crossed a line, and now the consequences of his ignorance were becoming clear. Finally, Seagal leaned slightly forward, placing both hands on the table in a deliberate, controlled gesture. "I will say this once," he began, his voice low but commanding, carrying the weight of someone who had seen it all. "Disrespecting anyone in my presence is a mistake you will not recover from if you continue. Your arrogance blinds you to consequences you cannot yet comprehend." The biker laughed nervously, attempting to cover his rising panic with bravado. "Oh yeah? And what are you going to do? Punch me? Everyone here sees that you're just a man sitting at a table." Seagal's expression remained calm, unshaken. There was no anger, no rush to action. Instead, there was the quiet patience of a predator assessing its prey, letting the tension mount, letting the biker fully feel the weight of his misjudgment. "It's not about strength," Seagal said slowly, each word deliberate. "It's about understanding. It's about control. It's about respect. And right now, you have shown neither." The biker's friends started to shift uncomfortably. They had counted on his bluster and intimidation to dominate the room, but now the energy had shifted completely. The crowd's focus had moved entirely to Seagal. Everyone could sense that the man they had underestimated was in complete control, and the realization of that control left the biker visibly shaken. Seagal made a subtle, almost imperceptible motion with his hand, a signal that was more about precision than threat. The biker noticed, a flicker of fear crossing his eyes, but he stubbornly refused to back down. "I'm not afraid of you," he spat, though his voice now carried a tremor of uncertainty. "You should be afraid of ignorance," Seagal replied, his voice calm, measured, yet terrifyingly precise. "Not of me." He leaned back slightly, letting the words sink in. The crowd collectively held its breath. The tension was thick enough to touch. The biker tried to laugh, but it was hollow. He knew he had miscalculated, but pride wouldn't allow him to admit it yet. He glanced at his friends for support, but their faces were tight with unease. They were witnessing the dismantling of their leader's confidence, piece by piece. Patrons who had been watching discreetly now whispered to each other, some shaking their heads, others clearly in awe. "He's not even moving," one said, "but you can feel it. He could destroy that guy without lifting a finger." Phones recorded every second, capturing Seagal's calm dominance for everyone watching. Seagal's voice cut through the murmurs of the room again, this time firmer. "You've underestimated me. You've underestimated your own lack of control. That is a dangerous combination." His tone was not threatening, it was instructive, a verbal strike that landed precisely where it needed to. The biker's laughter had vanished completely. Fear, shame, and the sudden clarity of his mistake replaced the bravado that had defined him moments ago. His body language shifted, fists unclenched, shoulders sagged slightly, and his smirk faded into an uncomfortable grimace. The lesson was clear. Power is not measured by loudness or aggression. It is measured by control, patience, and awareness. Seagal had demonstrated this perfectly. The crowd understood it. The biker understood it. Even his friends seemed to grasp, for the first time, that their idea of dominance had been hollow and misplaced. Seagal leaned back in his chair, voice steady, yet carrying the finality of someone delivering a verdict. Respect is not optional. It is earned, and it is demanded by integrity and awareness, not by foolishness or arrogance. Remember this moment, because it is the only lesson you will get without permanent consequences. The biker's head dropped slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, though pride still prevented a full admission. Around the bar, the energy shifted from tension to quiet admiration. Patrons whispered in awe, some recording, some simply staring, knowing they had just witnessed something extraordinary, a masterclass in calm authority and the subtle, devastating power of controlled presence. In that moment, it became painfully clear to everyone, especially the biker, that arrogance alone could not withstand true mastery. Have you ever witnessed someone completely dismantle a bully without touching them? Comment below if you've ever seen a moment like this, or if you'd like to see more stories of calm authority winning over arrogance. The biker's friends now hesitated, unsure if they should intervene or retreat. The room's focus had shifted entirely. All eyes were on the man they had mocked, and all energy was on the lesson being imparted, a lesson in patience, composure, and undeniable respect. Seagal remained seated, composed, silent, except for his words, letting the tension linger just long enough for the message to be completely understood. Arrogance meets its match in discipline, and pride without awareness is a dangerous mistake. The biker had finally realized the depth of his mistake. What had begun as casual arrogance, a careless attempt to mock and intimidate, had now transformed into a deeply humbling experience. Every nerve in his body was on edge. The laughter, the bravado, the swagger he had carried in moments before had evaporated completely. In its place was fear, a raw, gut-deep recognition that he had severely misjudged the man sitting calmly before him, Steven Seagal. Seagal's presence had dominated the room from the moment the biker first tried to provoke him. But it wasn't only the presence, it was the control, the authority that came from decades of experience, martial arts, mastery, and unshakable confidence. The biker's friends shuffled awkwardly behind him, unsure how to react. Their earlier amusement had vanished, replaced by a shared realization that their cocky companion had walked headlong into a lesson he was only beginning to comprehend. Seagal's gaze remained locked on the biker. There was no anger, no desire to humiliate, only a piercing, calm authority that made it impossible for the biker to escape the truth of the situation. "It's not about strength," Seagal said quietly, his voice deliberate. "It's about respect, something you clearly have yet to understand, and yet, you are now in a position to learn it, whether you like it or not." The biker's face paled, his earlier bravado replaced with shame. He opened his mouth to speak, to say something clever, something to save face, but no words came. Every patron in the bar was watching, the tension so thick it felt almost physical. The audience could see the internal struggle playing out in the biker's expression, pride and arrogance battling the undeniable truth of his miscalculation. Seagal's wife watched quietly, her eyes calm but attentive, sensing that the lesson was nearly complete. She trusted her husband to handle the situation with perfect balance, no unnecessary violence, but no tolerance for disrespect. The crowd, too, seemed to recognize the gravity of the moment. Phones were raised, recording, while whispers of awe spread like wildfire. He's not even touching him, and yet the guy looks terrified. The biker finally lowered his eyes, an involuntary gesture of acknowledgement. His shoulders slumped, the weight of realization settling onto him. Seagal leaned back slightly, his movements slow and deliberate, giving the biker space to comprehend the lesson fully. Every second in that silence reinforced the power of calm authority, teaching a lesson far deeper than any physical confrontation ever could. "Apologize," Seagal said softly, not as a demand, but as a necessary step in understanding respect. The biker hesitated, swallowing hard. Pride warred with humility, but finally, in a voice barely audible, he muttered, I'm sorry." The apology was genuine, trembling with the weight of fear and newfound awareness. The biker now understood that mockery, arrogance, and disrespect were dangerous when aimed at someone who had mastered self-control and authority. The crowd exhaled collectively, some nodding in approval, others shaking their heads at the lesson they had just witnessed. Seagal's words, calm but powerful, concluded the moment. Respect is not optional. It is not something you can demand or take. It is something you earn, and only when you understand the consequences of your actions. Let this moment be the turning point for you. The biker's friends stayed silent, their earlier bravado gone. The entire group now understood that their companion's arrogance had nearly brought them public humiliation. The bar patrons, too, felt a mixture of awe and relief. Cameras captured every second of the biker's humiliation, every nuance of Seagal's calm dominance, ensuring that the lesson would spread far beyond the walls of the bar. Seagal's wife finally smiled faintly, proud of the way her husband had handled the situation. There was no shouting, no violence, only control, authority, and a lesson in respect that the biker would never forget. If you were in the biker's shoes, would you forgive yourself or just walk away? Type forgive or regret in the comments below. The biker looked around at the patrons, the cameras, and finally, at Seagal. His arrogance had crumbled completely, replaced by the humility that only comes from facing someone far beyond your own reckoning. Every twitch, every nervous glance, every hesitation revealed the depth of his newfound understanding. For the first time that night, the bar returned to normal sounds, glasses clinking, quiet murmurs, but the lesson had left an indelible mark on everyone present. The biker had learned, the crowd had witnessed, and the story was being recorded to be remembered, shared, and retold for years to come. Seagal's presence remained calm and collected, as if nothing had happened. But the impact of that calm was absolute. The biker's regret, the crowd's admiration, and the unmistakable aura of authority left everyone with a clear message. Disrespect comes with consequences, and true power lies in control, patience, and the ability to command without aggression. The biker, humbled, nodded slightly, acknowledging both his mistake and the lesson. He would leave the bar that night forever changed, carrying with him the memory of what it truly meant to confront someone like Steven Seagal not with fists, but with the quiet, undeniable force of respect and authority. By the time the biker and his friends had finally left the bar, the room was buzzing with an energy that felt electric. What had begun as a casual night out, a momentary display of arrogance, had transformed into an unforgettable lesson in respect and authority. Patrons whispered to each other, some replaying the confrontation in their minds, others scrolling through their phone recordings, already eager to share what they had witnessed. Steven Seagal remained seated at his table, calm and composed, sipping the last of his drink. He exchanged a subtle smile with his wife, who leaned slightly closer, the faint glow of pride in her eyes. The lesson had been delivered, but more importantly, it had been internalized by the biker and witnessed by every person in the bar. No words were needed beyond the one Seagal had spoken. The authority in his demeanor had spoken louder than any shout or physical confrontation ever could. As the crowd began to relax, the reality of what had occurred sank in. The biker's arrogance had been completely dismantled without a single punch thrown. The respect Seagal commanded had turned fear into humility, teaching a lesson in a way that words alone could never capture. Patrons who had been recording the event began uploading videos online, eager to show the world what they had witnessed. Within hours, the videos were spreading across social media platforms. Comments poured in from people across the globe. That's how you handle disrespect without violence. Unbelievable control and authority. He didn't even raise a hand, and the guy was terrified. The story resonated universally. It was more than a bar confrontation. It was a demonstration of calm strength, humility, and the power of earned respect. Even news outlets began covering the incident, highlighting how Seagal had de-escalated a potentially dangerous situation through discipline, presence, and measured words. Headlines like "Seagal's calm authority shuts down cocky biker" and "Martial arts legend teaches bar lesson in respect" appeared, sharing the story with millions who weren't in the bar that night. People were captivated by how a single moment of composure could have such a profound impact. Meanwhile, the biker, now humbled and shaken, faced the consequences of his actions beyond just personal regret. Friends and acquaintances who had once admired his brashness now viewed his arrogance differently. The experience became a turning point for him, a stark reminder that disrespect and recklessness have real consequences, and that true authority cannot be challenged by noise or posturing alone. Seagal and his wife quietly left the bar, unnoticed by most, but the ripple of the evening continued to spread. Videos of the encounter were shared across social media platforms, trending in multiple countries. People analyzed Seagal's posture, his tone, and the subtle cues that had disarmed the biker without physical confrontation. It became a study in patience, strategy, and calm dominance lessons applicable not just in a bar, but in life. Fans and followers of Seagal praised him for showing restraint, proving that strength isn't about anger or aggression but about control and wisdom. Viewers across continents commented on the story, reflecting on how they could apply the principles they had witnessed in their own lives. The story transcended its location, becoming a viral example of how humility and calm authority could command respect instantly. Even in the bar, patrons replayed the scene in conversation, mimicking gestures, recounting every subtle warning, and marveling at the precision of Seagal's approach. The incident became a topic of discussion in martial arts circles, leadership forums, and online communities, a tangible lesson in self-control, strategy, and the psychology of authority. Seagal's handling of the situation left an enduring impression. Arrogance and disrespect are easily recognized, but true authority requires patience, observation, and measured action. He had shown that one doesn't need violence to teach a lesson. Sometimes, the quietest presence carries the heaviest weight. If you believe respect is earned through composure and integrity, type "respect" in the comments and subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. By the end of the night, the story had cemented itself as a viral legend. The biker's regret became a cautionary tale. The patron's admiration became a source of inspiration, and Seagal's calm mastery became a blueprint for handling conflict with dignity and authority. This single night in a quiet bar had become a global lesson, one that would be shared, studied, and remembered for years to come.